Gino went to Tulsa before it opened, and because of, he had a contact that introduced him to the curator. And so Gino went in and he got a backstage tour before it even opened of the thing, and of the Woody Guthrie Museum. And so that was cool. So didn't have to ask me twice about that one. So my wife and I said, let's go down there. So we went, we do a lot of road trips, and we stopped there. And Bill Pagel from Duluth was the guy I knew, and I called him, and he said, yeah, ask for the curator. And I did, and so he took me. We got the actually we couldn't get into the Dillon tour because, well, it's a long story. Basically, the Dillon archives were under lock and key at a museum, another museum, and that museum was being moved to a different place, and so nobody could get to it. Even he couldn't get to it. But he did take me into the Woody Guthrie Museum, which was cool. And I loved it, and we walked through the whole thing. He took me to the back loading dock where Bob had signed. And his signature was there, and they kind of covered it with plexiglass so it wouldn't get smeared or anything. And Bill Pagel was signed underneath that, and they asked me to sign underneath that. And then, because I told him that I knew Bob back then, he said, well, could we get some tape, put you on tape? I said, sure. He says, well, come back tomorrow and I'll have, so he did. He set up a camera on the stage, and it's the old story. He says, now don't answer just one-word questions. When I ask you to give me a sentence. And so he said, so did you know Bob? And 4 hours later, I stopped talking without really any questions. But I did that at the Dill Museum. And so then, that was the year before that it opened up. So then, when I heard the opening was happening, I called down there and I said, I thought my interview kind of would get me an invitation to the opening day. He says, that's not my job, my position. And he said, here, why don't you email this guy? Okay, so I'm not a big emailer, but my wife put an email together saying, told that whole story, how we went down there the year before and we'd like to come. I got an email back right away, absolutely, you're on the list. And so we went down there. We had passes and we were backstage, and we'd walk to the door and they'd say, Mr. Cohn, and they opened up the door. It was so cool. And we wandered that museum all by ourselves for a long time, and then there was entertainment. Patti Smith, Elvis Costello, and
is that the year Mavis Staples was there?
Yeah, Staples. Who'd you say?
Mavis.
Mavis Staples, of course. And so we go to these things, we had front row seats. It was really a cool thing. Bob, of course, wasn't there. They kept saying, is Bob going to show up? I knew he wouldn't show up. He was there actually about a week earlier. He had walked through, they told me. But that's not a place Bob would ever be in my mind. I just know. And I do these concerts in my front yard. I promote concerts in my front yard. People all the time say, why don't you get Bob to come? Yeah. Right, that's the last thing you would ever do.
Did Tulsa, did they give you a sense of what they might have planned for your footage, or did they ever do anything?
Archival, no, just there was in the archives, it's recorded. It's actually not a museum, it's a learning center, the Bob Dylan Learning Center, and they have the exhibit place, but then there's a back room that has archival stuff. The guy who owns the museum bought all of Bob's stuff, and a lot of it's all white gloves, you can't touch it and all that. And we got back there and I looked at some of the plans for the building I saw, but it's just a video that's sitting on a shelf somewhere that if anybody was doing research, they would have access to it.
So you talked about your kind of friendship dynamic with Bob. What was Larry's like over the years? Like, it must have been kind of like you said you were the guy that knew Bob Dylan to people and had geodesic domes, but Larry, he was even tighter with Bob. So did he like to talk about that, or did he keep it a secret?
No, he would talk about it. Larry would be invited to recording studios, and there was a Street Legal, I think, has a tribute to Bob, to Larry on the back, but that he was there. No, Larry and Bob were much closer than I were. And Larry had, Bob respected Larry a lot. And he was worthy of being respected. He was just such a remarkable person. But Larry would talk to me about things that he and Bob talked about, and a lot of, same thing. He'd like to talk about the old days. Bob did. He'd like to talk about people from the old days, about other musicians. Larry was a very close friend of Bob's, probably, I always tell people, is Bob's best friend while he was alive. Not that they were tight daily buddies, but I think Bob really, really loved Larry and respected Larry and understood how wonderful and how special Larry was. And needless to say, Larry understood the same thing about Bob, how special he was. Larry would say to me, "Aren't you so proud of Bob? Look what he's doing. Look what he got. Can you believe Bob would do that?" And it got to the point where, when we'd be on the road, I had more conversations with the bus driver than I did with Bob. Bob would be in the bus, or he'd go in the hotel, and he wouldn't come out, and we'd drive along, and the bus would all of a sudden pull off the road. I don't know what's going on. We'd follow him, he wanted to watch a basketball player from Hibbing, Laker, I can't think of what it was.
Was it Kevin McHale for the Celtics?
He wanted to watch Kevin McHale play his first game. So Bob got a hotel room with a TV. We sat and watched a game, and then got back in the bus and left.
That was Kevin McHale's first game in the NBA.
Yeah, I think it was.
Bob made the bus stop so you could watch the game on TV.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, televised.
Larry played No Money Down with Bob on stage in 1981. Were you there for that?
No, I wasn't there for that. Paul White was there. I had an infant son at the time. I couldn't go, but and Larry got real sick. He played it. Bob played trombone.
Saxophone.
I meant saxophone.
Saxophone.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, of course, saxophone.
Yep.
Yeah. There's even pictures of it. Saxophone.
Yeah, that's kind of a one-of-a-kind moment in Bob lore.
There's a guy named Glenn Dundas. Have you met him? He's from Thunder Bay.
I know of Glenn. I haven't met him.
Okay, well, he has a book. He puts many books of Bob's tour dates, every song in the order of every set list of every concert, and it's a hard-covered book. It's beautiful, and he's got a couple of them, and one of them is at the bottom, accompanied by saxophone. Larry Keegan, saxophone. Bob played saxophone. But then Larry got very sick then, and wound up spending a lot of time in the hospital, weeks in the hospital out there, and people would fly out to help Paul, who was traveling with him, Paul White, who really saved his life. Girls would fly out and to sit with Larry round the clock, and pulled him through. He had pneumonia, and one time we were in Mexico, nothing to do with Bob, but Larry, we were in Palenque, and at a ruin, and Larry was really sick. And in the hotel room, the only doctor in town was a vet who would come and help Larry. And there was a woman, there was a guy who was paralyzed, who had a board on the ground with wheels on it, and he would pull himself along with two wooden pallets. And we had been there before, and Larry met this guy, and so Larry brought a wheelchair down for this guy. We stole it from the University of Minnesota. We put it on top of Larry's van, we drove it down there, we gave it to this guy. We went back again, the wheelchair didn't hold up. It couldn't stand the rough roads and everything, it fell apart. But that guy's mother would bring chicken soup to Larry every day, and in the hotel room. So Larry got better, and we went to visit the mother, and there were dead chicken heads laying all over the ground where she had killed the chicken, made it into soup for Larry. And that was when another time Larry got really sick. Yeah, he was a strong guy. So, and then like one time we were coming back from Mexico with Larry and Bob. It had to do with Sam Peckinpah
Yeah,
film.
Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we were coming back.
So were you there for that shoot?
I wasn't there for the shoot.
You were with Larry, and
Larry was there for the shoot. Larry
Yeah.
was there and all that, but on the way back, somehow I hooked up with him in Texas. I can't exactly remember how that happened. I remember hooking up with Texas, and he had crossed the border, and I met him there, and I got in his van, and we wanted to buy some pot, and so we went to somebody's house or something, and knocked on the door, and we bought some pot, and the guy selling the pot looked at Bob and said, "Boy, you look a lot like Bob Dylan." Bob said, "Yeah, I get that a lot." He said, but that's, yeah, no, it was pretty interesting being around him. It was really a special time. I'm so privileged and so honored to be around him. I haven't seen him in 20 years. When Larry Keegan died on 9/11, which nothing to do with 9/11, he just had a heart attack on 9/11, and the airports were shut down, and so nobody come to the funeral. Larry couldn't come. I mean, Louis couldn't come. Bob couldn't come. They wanted to for sure, and there were a lot of people at that funeral, and I mean, it was really, really packed. There was a lot of people, biggest funeral I've ever gone to, and it was a sad day. And afterwards, I really haven't talked to Bob about Larry since then. I've seen him twice since then. Once at Sturgis motorcycle event in Sturgis, where Bob performed, and I go on backstage, and he came on. "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I came with a friend of mine who's into motorcycles." And
so did you just go to the backstage door and say, "Just tell Bob Dick Cohn's
well,
here"?
I have a laminate. I had a laminate. I always get day passes every time we go, and that's one of the main things I did. Larry and I would pull up and start in back of a gig. I'd knock on the door and I'd say, "I'm here with Larry Keegan. I want to see, the security guy or whatever." And so the guy would come and he'd say, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I'm with Larry and we want to get some passes." So he said, "Okay." And he'd bring out, "How long you be around?" "Oh, 3 days." "Okay." And he'd bring out a stick-on that would give us, and then Larry would stick them in his van. He had hundreds of them. And we had this stick-on passes. Well, one time, oh, this is good. One time like I say, we would jump in the car before the thing was over. Well, this one place, there was a water pond in front of the stage, and the crowd couldn't get close. And Bob didn't like that, and so he wound up not doing an encore. He just ran off, got in his bus, and left us behind. Well, where are we going? We didn't know, we just followed the bus. So I go to the bag man, the guy who carried the money, who was there, and I look up and I say, "We just got ditched by Bob. Where are we going? What's the hotel?" He said, "Well, I'm not really sure. Let's go to the bus and then we'll talk to them." So I go to the bus, and I'm standing next to the bus, and the guy's inside trying to get me the information, and the guy walks up and says, "Does anybody know who Dick Cohn is?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm Dick Cohn." He says, "Well, here." And he hands me a laminate pass, the first one, the only one I ever got, with my name spelt wrong, C-O-H-E-N instead of C-O-H-N. But it said Dick Cohn on the back of the pass, and he said, "Here, if you lose this, it cost you $50. I just found this laying under the bus," he said to me. I said, "Really?" So I go, "Well, that's interesting. I don't know what that's all about." So I took it, I run back to Larry, and here's the hotel we're going to, and look what I got. This guy gave me a pass with my name on it. And he said, oh, that's cool. It must have been Trish, a girl that traveled with Bob. One of the girls traveled with Bob. He says it must have been her, because she and I were the one that spent a lot of time going out getting food and all that. So, so I thanked her. I said, oh, Trish, really, thank you for getting me a laminate pass. I mean, she said, I didn't do that. There's nobody gets laminate passes unless Bob says it's okay. So I got one laminate pass. So I still carry it with me whenever I travel, just in case I'll run into it. So I had this laminate, and I go to the laminate to get me past all the basic security, through the gate up to the, up to a point where they say, well, that's not the current one, But at that point, I'll say, can you get Jeff Rosen over here? And he knows me. And so that's how I got backstage there. And then one time.
So tell me, tell me everything you remember about showing up backstage at Sturgis and what Bob's reaction was to seeing you and what you remember.
Okay, so Jeff says, oh yeah, well, I'll get you a day pass, stick on, because my pass wasn't good enough. He said, but I can't put you on the stage because they're selling seats on the stage for $1,000 and I can't, they're being sold. He said, so you're gonna have to go out in front. I said, okay, that's fine. And so I said, but I'd like to see Bob. And he said, well, okay, he's on the bus. And I just sat there in a chair looking at that bus for a half hour. We actually went to the green room and we had dinner. The Hells Angels were there. I got scared away. I said, oh, really? How long you traveled with Bob? He says, you're asking too many questions. I said, yes, sir. And I left. I didn't hang around for the Hells Angels inquest. But yeah, so I'm sitting watching, and then the next thing I hear, we're announcing Bob Dylan's on stage. So I missed him going from the bus. So afterwards, so I went out in front. It was when all the Sturgis people were there, and these people were, instead of applauding, they rev up their motorcycles, And so the girl next to me on a motorcycle leans over and she says, so, is Bob the one with the hat playing the guitar? Or is he the one? And Kid Rock was also on the venue that night on the gig. So, but I went backstage. I just wanted to say hi, Bob, and this was after Larry and everything. And so I went back, and Bob said, what are you doing here? I said, hey, I'm with a friend of mine with a motorcycle. I just wanted to say hi. He said, I gotta go. And he got on the bus and left right away, before even Kid Rock came on. We were camped there, and we stayed and watched Kid Rock, who I really enjoyed. I don't appreciate him as a person, but he kind of turned me on to his music. I liked, he performed really well. But that was that encounter.
So you saw him for maybe a minute backstage?
Not even a minute. But here's another one. One time, amongst things I did in my life, I ran Halloween stores in Minnesota. The first year that I got into it, a friend of mine ran Halloween stores in California. My friend Joe Marver, who started the Spirit Halloween business. And because I was in the display and exhibit business, he asked me to come out there and help him display one of his stores. He just got the biggest store he ever had, 24,000 square foot store, bigger, like a big Target store. And it was empty. And so I went out there and I worked in the store and I set up the store. And then Bob was going to do he was on tour and he was going to be in Sacramento for a night, and then his last tour was in San Jose. So I said, well, and they asked me to stay and manage that store. I said, well, I'll stay, but I need some days off because I'm going to go to these concerts. Right. So I go up to Sacramento, thank you. I went up to Sacramento, and I with a friend of mine who lives up there, and I was walking around where the auditorium was and stuff, and Bob comes out of the thing, getting onto the bus, and Dick, what's going on here? He said, yeah, I work here now, and we talked just a little bit, and he says, I'm really sick. I don't think I'm going to perform tonight. Well, I knew that wasn't true, because Bob had never not performed because he was sick, that I knew of. But that's what he said to me. I said, oh, well, that's too bad. I hope you feel better, but I'm going to be there if you're there. And so we had backstage passes, my friend and I, and we were backstage, and he performed, and he was sick, he again lent the bus, and so the next day was the last day of his concert in San Jose, and I wanted to go to that. So, and Larry wasn't here, Larry was back home. I was one of the only times I was on the tour without, or near without Larry. And so I go to the concert, and Maria Moldauer was there, and I had a car, I had a truck that I was given when I was there, and another friend of hers, and so we went to the concert, and then after the concert, Maria said, we were just invited backstage, do you want to come with us? I said, oh yeah, for sure. So Maria, Merelder, and we go backstage, and Neil Young ended the concert, came out and surprised everybody and did a last song with him. And so we go backstage, and there's Bob and Neil Young way off on the other side talking to each other. And I was with Maria, and I should preface this by the fact that years before, I met Neil Young and his wife, Peggy. And we were at a concert with Larry and talking to him and stuff, and when we all sat around, and Neil comes and says, well, I got to go to the bus, and everybody, she shook hands with everybody, Peggy went around, shook hands with everybody. Got to me, Peggy kissed me. Just gave me a kiss and said goodbye. Well, and I didn't even think about it. I didn't even notice it. Gino said, wow, she kissed you. Oh yeah, I guess she did. I didn't notice that. So, meanwhile, that happened years before. So anyhow, we're backstage, and there's Peggy. So I walked up to Peggy, and I said, I got to tell you the story, and I told her that she kissed me. And, oh yeah, I remember meeting you. And I said, well, you know, and I'm here for doing Halloween stores. That's what I do down here. And she said, you know, she had a couple of children. There was a bridge school for autistic kids. And I was telling her how there's stores when I was there setting them up. She said, you know, my kids might really like that. I said, absolutely, they'd love it. It's really cool. I said, why don't you, I will close the store down anytime you want. You bring your classroom through, get a bus, bring everybody there. I said, we'll have security, we'll do whatever you need. She said, that's a great idea, I like that. And in my pocket I had some eyeballs and some spiders and stuff I gave her a couple. I said, here, you know, take these to your kids. And she says, you know, that's a really good idea. I'd like to bring the kids there. Let me talk to Neil about that. I said, okay, just a minute. She goes, oh, Neil, come here. And he's across it, and I could just see Bob Dylan think, what the hell is Neil going to talk to Dick Cohn about, you know? But he comes over, and I gave him an eyeball, and she told him the whole thing about that. And he says, yeah, it's a good idea. We can do that. As it turned out, it never happened. I don't know exactly why. They just called back and said, we really can't make it happen. But that was my backstage encounter with Neil Young that Bob would have, I'm sure, was quite surprised. And the fact that he was back there with all these people was really kind of surprising. Even though he was back in the corner, it was the last night of his final tour, and so they had a party, and he enjoyed it. So that was, I don't know, that was another little.
So was Sturgis then the last time you've seen Bob?
Yeah, well, yes. No, I've seen him perform.
Yeah.
I've seen him perform. Once in Florida, I stood by the dumpster for a half hour trying to get backstage, but I couldn't. No, that was the last time I talked to Bob, yeah. And I have a friend from Nashville who is a songwriter and a producer and stuff, and he met Bob one time, and he said, how did it come up? He walked up to Bob and he said, Bob, I love Larry Keegan. That's how he started. Bob said, yeah, so did I. He says, yeah, I know Larry. I'm a good friend of Dick Cohn and Larry. And so he called me. He says, yeah, I mentioned your name to Bob, and he recognized it and all that.